Tonight, we've heard it all before. Break down trade barriers, support Canadian industry, cut our dependency on others. But when the time comes to act, something always seems to get in the way. So is Canada stuck in neutral? Plus, a government warning about TikTok. Should we listen, or are Canadians just tuning out?
And Trump is set to launch more rounds in the trade war, targeting copper and pharmaceuticals. From Montreal, I'm Eddie Tkalik.
And I'm Gary MacDonald. This is Night Talk, episode 41. Lots to talk about tonight. Before we get started, a reminder to join the conversation. Post your comments, and we will share as many as possible. Well, here we go. Let's dive into it. Earlier this year, as U.S. President Trump launched his ongoing trade war, Canadians suddenly turned attention once again to the issue of interprovincial trade regulations, making it difficult, if not impossible, to conduct business across provincial borders. Now, at the urging of then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and especially now Prime Minister Mark Carney, the provinces and territories started to talk openly about new deals to lift those trade roadblocks. There was a flurry of memorandums of understanding that were signed, but lately the pulse seems to be fading. So, let's have a quick look at some of the numbers that are involved here. Just let me bring up my where is it here? Here we go. And bear with me because I do have to make this font a little bit large. Anyway, what we've had since January 1st, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and Labrador. On April 24th, the scope includes labor. Ontario and Manitoba, May 14th, includes goods, labor, and alcohol sales. Manitoba, British Columbia on June 6th, memorandum to cut trade barriers. Ontario, partnerships, June 1st, memorandum of understandings with Saskatchewan, Alberta, and PEI via Ontario's Protect Ontario legislation. And Nova Scotia on June 25th removed key barriers with Alberta, BC, Manitoba, Ontario, and PEI. Now that adds at least 6 bilateral deals involving New Brunswick, Newfoundland and Labrador, Ontario, Manitoba, BC, Saskatchewan, Alberta, PEI, Nova Scotia, all in the first half of 2025. It's a fair amount of activity, but all of a sudden we don't seem to be hearing a lot about what they've been doing in the last month or so. Now, maybe the focus is on, okay, how are the talks going to go with Trump? I don't know. But we seem to have lost that momentum of getting things out of the way. Now, you will recall that Carney promised to remove federal trade barriers related to interprovincial trade on July 1st. He got the legislation through the House of Commons in time to keep that promise. So the feds are out of it altogether. It's basically strictly now between the provinces and the territories. And as I say, some of these are memorandums of understanding, but that's nothing concrete at this point in time. So are we losing our momentum all of a sudden? Have we become desensitized to the impact of the trade war and Trump's tariffs? Well, we're about to feel it once again as far as copper is concerned, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. So I don't know, Eddie. I'm getting a bit concerned that I don't see more. And yes, it is summer, but this is really extremely important to our nation. So summer, winter, doesn't matter. You do what has to be done. Am I?
I don't know. I haven't heard a hell of a lot either. I mean, basically what you just read off, I've seen that in the media. I think recently as well, there was some sort of agreements or conversations going on between Smith of Alberta and Ford of Ontario. I'm not exactly sure what that was about, but I know it had something to do with trade as well. I don't know, Gary. I still seem to think that the premiers are still working hand in hand in trying to ensure that they continue with progress, even though the government is effectively off for the summer. I kind of feel that there will be a continuing, ongoing long-term conversation between the federal government and the provincial premiers to talk about how are we progressing in terms of addressing our independence from the United States from an economical perspective. And Carney had said it 100 times. Most of the premiers had said it on numerous occasions that a lot of our future to be independent is to be able to work with each other and minimize or eliminate those interprovincial trade barriers. Although right now we might have some memorandums of understanding between provinces, which is a hell of a lot better than what we've seen in the last few decades, especially the last 10 years. I'm right now. I'm holding my breath. I'm hoping to see something substantial and concrete come out in the next couple of months. At least into September, and see what that holds. I think that Carney is being the economist that he is. I think he's going to have regular meetings, if not face to face, at least virtually, with all the premiers to see how everyone is progressing in terms of eliminating some of these trade barriers. Gary, I'm not overly worried about it. I'm not sure if maybe the media has placed less attention on what the premiers were doing in terms of the trade, releasing the trade, getting rid of the trade barriers. Excuse me, but I do have to agree with you. It has been a little quiet. I'd have to agree with you on that. I'm not worried about it yet, but I agree with you that it's been a little quiet.
Well, the deal between Ontario and Alberta related a lot to getting some of the precious metals that Ontario has in northern Ontario to a new deep water port on Hudson's Bay. Was it Churchill, I think?
No, it would have to be Hudson Bay or James Bay because that borders Manitoba and Ontario, so it'd have to be there someplace.
Yeah. I had the name and it just escapes me now as I start to talk about it. But the fact of the matter is, Danielle Smith of Alberta sees it also as, okay, we build a pipeline up to there and another way of getting Alberta oil out.
Using the Arctic Passage, I see.
Yeah. However, I was watching something the other night and they were talking about the fact that you can't do a deep water port there. It's too shallow. And you're not going to be able to get the larger ships in that you need.
Well, especially the tankers,
Yeah. And now you've got a Norwegian company apparently making noise again about an LNG facility here in Quebec to ship LNG over to Europe. And Legault's more committed to it than perhaps what he was to the original proposal, 3 years ago? But still, leaving that, what is it, social acceptance or social conscience deal, still leaving that very much on the table. And then we still have a deep water port in New Brunswick that can handle any size of oil tanker and has, or any size of LNG tanker and has as well up to this point.
Either way, we got to get the resources out to that deep port, right?
Yeah,
That's,
we've got to get it. The biggest thing right now, as far as Alberta is concerned, and even with Ontario, and to a degree here in Quebec as well, because we do have a lot of the minerals, and we do have a very active mining community. We need to get those resources to eastern tidewater,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
I'm not hearing that far. I'm hearing to a point where it might be beneficial more to a certain group and not to the country as a whole.
Yeah,
And
don't you
that's
kind of
where,
wonder? Don't you kind of wonder why Premier Legault is kind of I don't know. I wouldn't even call it lukewarm. It seems to be more wishy-washy. He's not really looking at this as a great opportunity for Quebec in terms of a project building facilities to get the liquefied natural gas over to the St. Lawrence Seaway. I forget what city where they were looking at doing this. Sept-Îles. I'm not exactly sure,
yeah,
but yeah, getting it out there. I mean, this would be tremendous in terms of a boom to the economy from a construction perspective, from the management portion of that particular pipeline, and then again to you know a hard pressed from a labor perspective region like Sept-Îles. I mean, this would bring a tremendous influx of Quebec influence to the Canadian and to the Canadian economy, where they're contributing A to the country and B they're contributing locally to what people need in Quebec is jobs, and then continued revenue that comes along with this natural flow of product through their port. I just don't understand why they don't at least do that, and in the long term, finish the pipeline out to New Brunswick, where you're saying, it can accommodate anything out there in terms of what needs to be shipped overseas. So I really don't understand why Premier Legault was not taking the bull by the horns on this one. I think it would be a great win for him, considering the other challenges that he's facing, tremendous challenges he's facing in this province in terms of attracting Canadian business, attracting international business here, with the usual complications with the language laws here, and the other complications where the education system is severely lacking teachers and the medical system is lacking medical professionals. So you know what? He just cannot seem to win in those areas I just mentioned. This would be a big win for the guy. So I'm not exactly sure why he's not going after it, Gary. What do you think about that? I just find it weird. He's just uncharacteristically quiet about this.
yeah.
You know, it's odd.
Maybe he's trying not to step into it somehow, because as we both know, the popularity of Legault and the CAQ has tanked big time. And maybe
And
he's trying to.
hence, this would be a great win for him. I think.
Sure, it
You
would,
know,
but maybe he's hesitant that if he sounds like he's conceding too much or giving in too much to the rest of the country, that he's not standing up for Quebec, and there goes his base, what's left of it.
yeah, standing up for Quebec. Well, do you not bring in a golden opportunity for the sake of not looking after Quebec when in fact you are? Yeah, I know this is a Canadian. I know this is something that's going to help Canada, and Quebec is part of Canada right now and very dependent on Canada. And that's just a situation. It's a golden opportunity for Quebec. Yeah, you know what? You're helping Canada. Okay, that's no different than helping another country you're doing business with. So I can
Exactly.
see maybe where, yeah, I mean, he's really, really getting killed in the polls. And I mean, thing recently he was saying, oh, yeah, you know what? I think we're going to win the next election. And I kind of rolled my eyes and saying, dude, have you been looking at what the polls are saying about you and how poorly we're doing? I tell you, quite honestly, I think this whole thing about Team Canada and addressing the issues of the United States of America, um, you know what? I thought he handled himself very well,
He did.
looking at defending the interests of Quebec, which I'm very interested in as well. I know you are. but by the same token, contributing to the interests of the entire country, because we've got a big issue to deal with, which is the United States of America. I thought he looked very good on that stage, at least. He didn't look out of place. I think he looked very comfortable in dealing with the media as they were meeting, as all the ministers were meeting with Prime Minister Carney. He just went off. Gary, he disappeared. I don't know if he went hunting up north someplace or what, but he's just completely disappeared off the map here in Quebec, and I don't know what's going on. To me, it's just an opportunity lost if he doesn't if he doesn't take the bull by the horns on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the whole thing about trade between the provinces, 8 years ago in 2017, the Canada Free Trade Act was an intergovernmental pact between federal, provincial, and territorial governments aimed at, are you ready? Eliminating internal barriers to the movement of goods, services, investments, and labor across the country. And it replaced an old agreement on internal trade that covered nearly all economic sectors and provides formal pathways for governments to remove non-tariff barriers through many exemptions that remain, like 300 pages worth. Like, here we go. Can't you keep it simple, stupid? And the economic impact was, economists estimate internal barriers cost Canada about 4% of real GDP per capita. Businesses cite logistics, licensing, and buy local measures as the biggest hurdles. What has changed in 8 years? It looked like we were on the path to change, but I don't know, Eddie. Like, it just seems now.
It just seems like ink wasted on 300 pages of paper, Gary. I haven't seen anything. If anything, I've actually seen more division on the subject.
Yeah, exactly. It seems to be going in that direction once again. And I saw a comment the other day on one of, I don't know if it was X or Threads, one of them. And the comment was, and obviously the guy's a Westerner, said, let's cut off the Western money going to the equalization payments to Quebec. If they don't want to play ball with getting our oil to Eastern Tidewater, then cut off what we're supplying as far as equalization payments are concerned to Quebec. Here we go. Like, for a while we were all pulling together, and now you do have more rumblings in Alberta of separation, unhappiness, sounding much like what we've witnessed and gone through here in Quebec over the last number of years. Folks, like, put that all aside. It means nothing right now. The country means everything. And either one of these two provinces, as far as separation is concerned, they're blowing smoke up the butts of their supporters, because you just don't vote out and then the next day you're your own country. What are you doing for currency? How are you going to pay for the federal property that's owned by Ottawa in your jurisdiction? What sort of deals? What kind of a military are you going to be able to afford? On and on and on it goes. Like, folks, give your heads a shake here. Monel says, I want him out, Legault. I'm done with him. I'm done with Mayor Plante. Done with all of them. Out. All of them, they go. So, I think there's a growing sentiment in that direction. And some of the provinces that'll be going to the polls over the next 6 months to a year, it's going to be interesting to see exactly how those elections all shake out. Really interesting to see how they all shake out. So hopefully, Eddie, you're right, and that, there's a bit of a summer lull, and
I don't think Prime Minister Carney is taking any breaks here. I firmly believe he's not lulling about. He's working. I'm sure he's got his people working, and it's not going to be communicated or conveyed out to media because, hey, we're not closed for business, but Parliament is closed for the summer break. But I'm sure that he is working with his people. I mean, look, the guy's got a minority government. He's got to keep the momentum going because down in the United States, things are happening. Never mind every day, Gary. I mean, things are happening with every bowel movement down there. So we have to be ready, and I'm sure Carney and his team are standing by, ears close to the ground in terms of what's going on, and effectively moving things forward with Europe, B, moving things forward and finding an alternative to the United States, and C, moving forward with how do we make ourselves an economically strong country without completely depending on the United States of America. We're never going to get completely out of the same bed with the United States of America, but we got to minimize the amount of time we spend in there. And I firmly believe that Prime Minister Carney, at this particular point in time, continues to do so behind the scenes, and we'll see what plays out in September and October, Gary. That's September and October are going to be so important because the Parliament will reconvene. And B, he's got to table a budget. He's got to table a promised budget. So I'm sure they're all working on this right now because, as much as things change daily in the United States, he's got to at some point draw a line in the sand and put together a budget that the government in Canada can work with over the next year. So he's not swimming. He's not out drinking a Moosehead beer out in his pool in the back. That's for sure.
Well, he has sent out orders to the ministers to start looking at their budgets and deciding what's important and what's not important. Mm-hmm. And he's looking for some pretty substantial cuts over the next couple of years. Fairly substantial cuts. It's going to be really interesting to see how that all shakes out as well, because he has committed a large amount of money, and right now the biggest amount of money is going to defense.
Right.
And rightly so, for a number of reasons. But it has to come from somewhere. So it will be interesting to see what he does with it. Now, just before we move on, because speaking of the Prime Minister, there's something else to work into this whole issue, and we will in a moment. Just want to remind you, we really want you to join the conversation tonight and tell us what you're thinking about this whole situation and the other issues we're going to be discussing. So all you have to do is just put your thoughts in the comment section on Facebook or on YouTube. They'll pop in, I'll see them pop in, and we're going to get as many of them on as possible, share them, respond to them, see what other people think. This is really about you. So join the conversation, as we say, get involved, and let's hear what you're thinking. Now, speaking of
absolutely, just to support that, I know there are a lot of people that watch us on YouTube and they actually participate in Facebook, but are just too shy to put a comment. Put any comment. We'd love to hear from you so we can actually get some good conversation going amongst yourself, Gary, and myself, and also the other viewers. It's really going to help out. And I know there is one gentleman out there that's actually watching, and I want you to comment. Don't be shy. He goes by the moniker of G-Spot. Okay, so G-Spot, if you're watching, I want to see a comment from you. Okay.
Okay, I'll be watching for that one to pop up for sure. And the other thing is, just to break the ice, just put a hello from Joe or hello from New Brunswick or whatever, just to break the ice so that you feel a little more comfortable about how it all works. But by all means, do so. When we started this stream back in September of last year, one of the big ideas we had behind it all was, we have a lot to say and we're going to sound off, but we want you involved as well. We want all sorts of opinions coming in, and we want to be challenged as well. Let's have a great debate back and forth. And, it can be a lot of fun. Anyhow, The Prime Minister, Mark Carney, last month during a speech in Toronto, was outlining his government's new approach to beefing up our military and diversifying military purchasing by encouraging Canadian industries as well as seeking new partners such as Europe. Now, how has that gone? Well, first of all, let's hear what Carney said that.
Our plan will help ensure that Canada is strong at home and reliable abroad. We will ensure that every dollar is invested wisely, including by prioritizing made-in-Canada manufacturing and supply chains. We should no longer send 3/4 of our defense capital spending to America.
Did you hear that? 3/4 of our defense capital spending to America.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane.
And as I said, how has that gone? Or as I asked, how has that gone? Again, really? A lot of talk. Reality is the review continues on the purchase of those F-35 fighter jets from the U.S. Mild interest expressed in President Trump's Golden Dome missile protection scheme. And now the mounting uproar over the purchase. Are you ready? Night vision goggles for the military, with a European company saying the bid criteria were so narrow it was locked out of the competition, which it says favors one company only. And guess what? That is an American company. So does this show how broken the system is? Are we talking the talk but not walking the walk? Like, really?
Yeah, I mean, wow. I was surprised by that, Gary, because doesn't the Minister of Defense report directly into the Prime Minister of Canada, first of all? Okay. And when you're putting bids out, I understand you want to be completely transparent within the government and even to the public to a certain degree in terms of the bid structure. But you know what? This doesn't smell good, Gary. I don't know about you, but this just does not smell right to me. You know what? I mean, the losers in any bid are always going to say this, that, and the other thing. But we're talking about an international item of importance here, which is defense of the country, arming our soldiers with the proper equipment. But at the same time, you have to be fiscally responsible, and you have to be responsible for where your dollar goes. Just to quickly, arbitrarily, just go to somebody in the United States when, in fact, at this particular time, we're focusing on diversifying ourselves from just being, a 75% of our spending pipeline into the United States. This first one really doesn't sit very well with me, man. I'm telling you, it doesn't sit well. Like, what the hell? No other companies on the planet can compete with what the United States is gearing their soldiers up with, and we have to take it. I don't know that one. I don't understand that one. I have to hope there was some sense to the logic of selecting this company in the States, but yeah, that one's a little bitter to swallow, to tell you the truth.
And apparently, some aspects of the contract and what's demanded of those goggles, it goes over and above what NATO considers as the line. And
is it a done deal?
Give me a couple of minutes and I'll double check that. Yeah. I think it's in the process, but I'll double check that for sure. The other side of it is, though, this whole thing could have started just prior to the change in government, because when you're talking military procurement, it is like sitting there and watching the river go by on a lazy summer afternoon.
You're right. This could have been months in the making, last year even, right? We don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So and because of all of the attention on our military spending right now, it may have all of a sudden just up to the surface, and especially with Carney going to Europe and saying, okay, we want to talk to you about supplying us, and probably this European company said, well, I might as well just lay the cards on the table.
Right.
So, I once again, we are we walking? Are we talking the talk and walking the walk? I don't think so. Okay, here we go.
Not at this time, no.
Yeah.
This-
So, in response to our suggestion that people jump in quickly, Monel, this if you need me to be more vocal, but okay. Hello, Monel. And then we have Joe. What's up?
well, there we go. There he is. By the way, I owe him a couple of cases of Moosehead beer. The British
Uh-oh.
Columbia Lions beat the Alouettes in the last second with a field goal last week.
Oh.
Yeah, so I gotta cough that up.
So again, we're talking about trade. We're talking about trying to open up new avenues of trade so we aren't so dependent. And God knows we got stung big time by Trump in our reliance on the United States. And we can't go down that road again. We can't sit back and say, oh, it's going to get better in 3 years. Really? Is it?
No.
Who knows?
Yeah.
You can't say that for sure. Well, everything's working now. It just takes one thing, one wrench to be thrown in, and boom, look what happened. Think back to January into February of this year. Don't lose sight of that. And, if you're not hearing much from your politicians, there's nothing stopping you. Doesn't matter if they're on the barbecue circuit. There's nothing stopping you from expressing your thoughts to your MP, to your member of the legislature, to sending emails to the ministers, the federal ministers, the prime minister, the premier, the provincial ministers, and keep the heat on to get off their asses and let's get this thing moving so we don't find ourselves the poor cousin sitting on the front porch once again, watching the world go by.
Right.
I'm sorry, like I just get a little bit more than frustrated about this thing, but
And rightly so, Gary. I mean, I share your frustration. Like, let's stop sitting on our hands and get stuff done because the world has picked up pace. It's faster than it was last month. It's faster than it was last week. Got to pick up the pace and move in these things. There's no time for the dilly-dallying of political correctness. Let's say what needs to be said and then let's get it done, especially when it comes to our military contracts and the defense of our country, Gary. Because like you were saying, we don't know what's going to happen next week. We just don't.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I think it's time to move on.
Okay.
And coming up, are you sitting there doom scrolling on TikTok while watching our stream this evening? You're not alone, despite a warning from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, and the federal government about the impact on national security. So are you being hampered by your cable internet not performing as promised? Eddie and I have shared your pain thanks to our former cable service. Believe me, have we shared your pain. We have both switched to Ebox, and it's pure fiber internet. Ebox is offering extremely competitive plans and pricing. Click the affiliate link below to get more information on exactly what they are offering. Well, late last year, the federal government ordered the highly popular social media platform TikTok to cease its operations here in Canada. The platform is owned by a Chinese-based company and has been deemed a national security threat here and in other countries, I might add. Federal workers here are not allowed to install the app on their government-issued phones. I would hope so. The director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service says the app can provide a direct pipeline of personal and other information to the Chinese government if they put the pressure on the company. and that can pose a risk to our national security. By the way, Ottawa says Canadians can continue to use the app, but be aware of the risks. So they have ordered the company to wind down its Canadian operations. The company is in the process of doing that, but it also has launched a challenge in court against the government order to do so. Meantime, as part of the fact that they're winding down operations in Canada, TikTok has pulled funding for a number of major festivals and other cultural events across the country, including one big one here in Quebec. So the platform continues. Canadians continue to doom scroll hours upon hours per day on TikTok. You fed in all of your information to the app, which is controlled by the parent company ByteDance, and at any time the Chinese government could just come give us the information, and they can use that information to piece together a whole bunch of things, including starting to piece together some sensitive information. And then it starts to snowball from there. So are we paying attention? Apparently not, because I know there were a lot of people who were upset about TikTok and being told to get out of Canada. What am I going to do? And in the States, that's been a football that's been kicked back and forth. And at last go around, the US government said it could remain as long as it was sold to an American interest. And I think it was this weekend or just before this weekend, the current occupant of the Oval Office indicated, well, the sale is near. Really? Is that the famous, it'll happen within the next 2 weeks? Because everything happens within the next 2 weeks. Except the bombing of Iran. He did go in a little earlier on that one. So, frankly, I can't take 5 seconds of TikTok. I've tried, and I can't. I just cannot find any way to relate to it. Yes, there's information on there. There's some very learned people on there. There are also some not so learned people. There are also some people who have all sorts of weird and wonderful ideas that they're going to influence the world and take over at some point. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of misinformation that's being taken for granted, as it was during the pandemic. A lot of misinformation. And it's not being policed in any way. Of course, the minute you step in and start putting some limitations on it, you're going to be accused of censorship. Right. And that is a very, very fine line that you walk. There's no question. You're walking a fine line when it comes to censorship. But dear God, when you watch some of it and listen to it, it's, because I hear people with TikTok going in the background and, oh my God.
You know what, Gary? It's like, here we have CSIS has basically tagged this service provider, this social media provider, as a security risk. It's already been declared a security risk a couple of years now, where federal employees no longer are allowed using it on their government devices. Makes perfect sense. When you have your intelligence agency of a country that basically says, dear citizens, you know what? It's there for you if you want to use it, but you're really introducing yourself to some significant risk. Absolutely, people should listen. But then, like you're saying, you look at the individuals that use TikTok for their, let me, how should I put it politely? Not so intelligent purposes, if you want to put it. Do you think they're going to listen to a spy agency in the country that they live in? Chances are probably not. You're absolutely right, but don't forget too, right? I mean, the Chinese can do all kinds of stuff with their apps, and you're completely unaware of it because it's sitting on your smartphone. Look, as AI starts become more prolific and more difficult to manage and control, who knows what the Chinese are using AI for? Maybe in conjunction through their TikTok application to get whatever information they need and listen in on anything that they needed to listen to. And you have zero idea because A, you're not careful. B, you don't really care what's going on in the country. And C, you're making crazy videos because that's all you're interested in while a foreign government is actually listening in on what you're doing, and also by the same token using your personal information to put together, like you said, who knows what. Maybe
Well,
put a yeah.
I was just going to say that, what people tend to forget sometimes is, you're putting in like your name and you don't necessarily have to put in your address or whatever, and you put in a fake name for that matter. But the fact of the matter is they can see your IP address and they can zero in on the general area of your IP address
Right.
and then start going from there. It doesn't take much. How do you think Find My Phone works, or Find My AirTag,
Mm-hmm.
all of that? Think
Yeah.
about that for a second, folks.
Yeah, look, you know what? It's definitely a security risk, especially when you have a country that's extremely interested and motivated in acquiring as much information as possible about another country, whether through its citizens or through government means and hacking systems and whatnot. They're going to continue doing so, and they're going to continue enhancing that capability right under our noses. So I guess it begs the question. I mean, you mentioned the word censorship. I mean, that's scary stuff. I mean, you don't want to start getting into censorship because that kind of starts infringing on our freedom of speech, right? And you don't really want to do that. But where is the fine line? Do we need someone protecting us from ourselves? I think is the bigger question here. And does the federal government just arbitrarily take that responsibility? Well, how you figure that I rely on the Canadian government to protect me in my country of Canada. As a citizen of Canada, I expect them to protect me. Now, most of us think about protection as military protection, or if you're looking at on the municipal side of things, you're looking at the police force protecting me as a citizen. Well, why is, I mean, that's a physical protection type of thing, if you want to put it, right? Assault and who knows what other crimes. So it's not military, it's not local police force, like the criminal element. There's a whole other side to the world out there. And that's driven by the creation of the internet, where you have all of these platforms out there and all these apps that are dependent on that. Who's protecting us from apps that we might just download that are going to create problems for me as a person? We're hearing horror stories about fraud, banking fraud, e-transfer fraud, for crying out loud, where that's being infiltrated because people are downloading apps that may be advertised by TikTok, and all of a sudden you've lost your bank account, you've lost your savings, who the hell knows what. So it begs the question, Gary, should we expect our government to protect us and take the liberty of protecting us and making decisions in phasing out organizations like TikTok and limiting our access to such platforms, because they may be dangerous, maybe not physically, but in another area, they're dangerous to us as citizens. I want free speech. I don't want anybody to censor me, but by the same token, I want to be protected. How can you expect your government to protect you if their hands are tied behind their back, right? Hard one. It's a tough one. It's a hard one.
Yeah. And what is it doing to people who spend most of their day, or the better part of their day, scrolling on TikTok and watching these videos? I mean, the attention span was, really, you had about 8 seconds to land your message, and if you didn't land it in the first 8 seconds, you've lost them.
Right.
I'd like to see a new study to see if that 8 seconds is, been shrinking, and we might even be in, half of that in the 4-second range to grab somebody's attention. Because if the attention spans have not grown shorter, then why is it you see people just, thumbing through the what's available on TikTok, for example, just like boom, 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 boom.
Right. Because
nothing's grabbing them and holding them for very long. And it's similar to YouTube, and that's why you have everybody seems to think that the wild and crazy thumbnails will grab your attention. Well, it might make you stop and maybe click, but the minute you open up that video and it's not saying or doing what you thought it was going to, you're gone anyway. So, have you, won anything? No, not at all. But also, what's it say about our trust in our government and what the government's doing and our government's judgment on tech and privacy?
Well, you being a lifelong broadcast journalist and professional, how would you feel about the government making a decision and saying, Gary, TikTok is no longer available to you as a Canadian citizen, cease and desist? How would you feel in terms of that limiting your liberties for freedom of speech and freedom of reporting? I know how I feel as a citizen. It's a very fine line, but how do you feel as a professional broadcast journalist?
Well, every day you're walking that fine line as far as the censorship issue is concerned, especially when you're dealing with governments, and even more so now, trying to get information from governments is like it's a real battle. Trying to get information from police departments, a real battle, because they feel that, well, there's only so much that we really need to give or have to give that is good for you to consume what you need, and that's it. Well, let us be the judge of that as to what we want to consume or not consume. The app, I know exactly where you're going, Eddie, and I'm torn on this because, yes, I don't want to see any form of censorship or anything that could, walk the fine line and maybe fall over into the area of censorship. I like to think that I have a few licks of sense and I can make an informed decision of my own. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who really can't or don't want to go to the effort of trying to get both sides of the story to make an informed decision that they would feel comfortable with. So it is a very fine line. And again, it's coming down now to, I think more and more, there's a complete lack of trust between the average person on the street and the various levels of government. They don't trust anything. As a matter of fact, there's a growing lack of trust between the average person on the street and the mainstream media.
True.
That's another issue that's growing. They don't believe a thing they see on the mainstream media, but then they'll go to TikTok or some of the YouTubers and listen to what they're saying. Okay, go listen to what they're saying, but then come back and listen to the other side. There are always, there are three sides to a story. Their side, and somewhere in between the actual truth.
True.
And most of the time you can tell when most people can tell when they're being lied to or shall we say, the message is being massaged.
Manipulated.
Massaged.
Okay.
Okay, let's catch up here. Joe is, what's Joe saying? Whoops. Let me get rid of that as well. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, Joe says it's totally absurd. It's a security risk with a country that has human rights violations and who we are also in a trade war with. China has stolen and reverse engineered much of Western technology. That's a really good point that Joe brings up about
He's right.
the whole thing. Yeah. Look at back in the 80s when they were pirating all kinds of versions of Windows, for example, Microsoft Windows and other Microsoft programs, and you know, and even now, look at the and when Trump fired off the trade war, there were like some of the big Chinese retailers like Shein and Temu and some of those who all of a sudden started really promoting their knockoff stores. And in some cases, they were going to the same manufacturer who was manufacturing the actual brand label. And you look, and it was extremely hard to tell the difference, if at all.
Right.
So, yeah, you know, like a lot of this has been going on, and I don't know, like Joe, you know, that's a really good point that you bring up there. And we've got a couple more coming in here. Let's see. Where'd it go? Okay. Move that. And Joe said, even more baffling is the fact that BC has just entered into a contract to replace the BC ferries with a Chinese one. I know that has caused a major uproar. And I don't think Ottawa was aware of it initially. I think they found out when Premier Eby announced it. It might have helped their Premier Eby if he had maybe picked up the phone and called Ottawa to give them a heads up.
Yeah.
Maybe
it's one of those things that was under negotiation for who knows how long, right?
Well, there is that too. Yeah. There's that. Nancy writes in, I had a very scary situation with RBC. Told AI made the call. Had to photo my driver's license, then self-photo. I was in the bank with their help. As determined as I was, not me. Driver's license, black hair. Today, gray, white. Bank clerk clearly had no control. He said it was AI scary.
Wow.
Yeah, like, excuse me, it's me. Anyway, she said, we got it settled later. I'm in St. John and I am known. What if I was traveling in foreign countries?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you know what? That's happening now, too, with some of the passports in the passport pictures. People are getting challenged more, especially going south, getting challenged more and more as to what their, that doesn't look like you.
Right.
You have dark hair and now you have no hair. Well, I decided to shave it off. Well, it doesn't look like you. Well, the passport was good for 10 years. The picture's 10 years old. So,
yeah.
I can't help it if I've become more handsome over the 10-year period. Like, what's your problem?
You took the words right out of my mouth.
I don't know what their problem is. So
that's true.
Yeah. So we have, and AI is like, I'm gathering some material for a show on AI. I think we have to, at some point, maybe this fall, line up a show and have a good conversation about AI, because I'm using it a lot. I don't take everything it tells me for granted. As a matter of fact, I've corrected my buddy Chat GPT a couple of times on things. When I asked a question and it came back with the information and some of the background information, it's like, you better take another look, because what you just said, that was 1985. I'm talking about this year, 2025. And, it's funny to watch how it apologizes. Not necessarily ever take, like a lot of politicians, not necessarily ever take any of the blame.
Yeah, it is certainly fallible. I mean, especially when you have an exchange of information. You ask a question, you get information. You dig deeper, it gives you information. That's one thing in terms of AI and the usefulness of it, of course, right? But when you're looking at AI in terms of manipulating videos, manipulating voice, and putting people together that really don't exist, that's the scary part, Gary. And you
Yeah.
know what? I think you're right. I think that would be a really fun episode if we can put one together sometime in the fall. A great discussion, especially with that big, beautiful bill that just got passed in the United States. That's basically eliminating all a lot of the states that actually have legislation to monitor AI and to manage AI is essentially being eliminated. So that is going to get more scary over time as this bill just takes a sledgehammer to a lot of the protections that we as citizens of the planet Earth have, and just letting AI go rampant
Yeah.
the way it seems to be taking speed would be of general interest for us to discuss, and as well as our viewers. I'm sure it'll be a fun show.
Yep, absolutely. So coming back to TikTok, the bigger question: should the public trust Ottawa's judgment on tech and privacy when our own policies related to tech and privacy within the federal government, within provincial governments, lag behind? Even our laws.
Mhm.
Our laws have not kept up with what's been unfolding from an electronic standpoint. So should we trust what direction they're pointing us in, especially when it comes to TikTok, because it's so highly popular? Um, you know, look at the Phoenix payroll system for the federal government. They're
Right.
finally now giving up on that after spending millions and millions of dollars, and they're going out looking for a replacement. And then you had the Arrival app, and what a fiasco that was. Again, millions of dollars on something
Arrive
that
can.
never worked.
Yeah.
Never
Arrive can.
worked. So I get if somebody says to me, and whether they're a TikTok fan or not, they say, "Well, why should we listen to what Ottawa is telling us when they, some of their departments are still using fax machines, for God's sakes?" Which is true. Oh, well, the fax is much more. Is it really? It comes out on a piece of paper and sits in a basket until somebody comes by to pick it up. Anybody walking by can read what's on it.
It sounds like the health system here in Quebec. They're still working on faxes.
And once again, where's the confidentiality there? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it just blows my mind when I see that kind of foolishness taking place. Anyway, that's that part. And we have one more comment. Joe's going to chime in again here. Trump will use AI to fool more of his MAGA maniacs.
Which might be the reasons behind why it's in the big beautiful bill, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It may not necessarily be Trump catching on to it, but somebody within the gathering of chuckleheads he surrounded himself with does.
Yeah.
For whatever the reason. All right, so we'll leave TikTok alone, and it'll be interesting, where they've withdrawn funding from a number of cultural events, festivals across the country, and rightly so. They're in the process of winding down their operations as ordered, and I think they have a timeline on that as well. And I forgot to look up the goggles. I'll try and do that.
And I think it's most of their employees that are actually here are foreign nationals, I believe, right? I mean, they're not even Canadian citizens working the system.
Well, some are, because just after they were ordered to pack up and get out, they've been running a fairly hefty public relations campaign, lot of ads on YouTube, for example, and I've even caught ads on mainstream media as well. So and some of the people like they're I forget what her title is, but she's Canadian, and they had a number of young Canadian performers that they've been assisting and so on. It was a well thought out and well planned public relations effort. That's for sure. So we'll see where it goes. The big thing now, I guess, it's going to be up to the courts to make the decision, right. And who knows? Even if it goes against them at the lower court level, they may try to appeal to the Supreme Court. Yeah. But then everything could change if a deal does go through within 2 weeks for the sale of TikTok in the States to an American owner, whoever that may be. All right. Okay, so we'll move on from there. Up next, the latest salvo in the Trump trade war is landing, once again, a direct hit on another Canadian export. Are you still looking for a Canadian solution for web hosting and related activity? Well, the answer is based here in Montreal. Web Hosting Canada, WHC, provides complete web hosting services from its Canadian-based servers protected under Canadian privacy laws. Pricing is very competitive and in Canadian dollars. I've been using them for 4 years now, and I've been extremely happy with the service. Now, there is an affiliate link below, so you can check out what they are offering. All right, here we go with item number 3. And of course, who does it center upon? None other than the guys in the White House.
We'll be announcing something very soon on pharmaceuticals. We're going to give people about a year and a half to come in, and after that they're going to be tariffed if they have to bring the pharmaceuticals into the country, the drugs and other things into the country. They're going to be tariffed at a very, very high rate, like 200%. We'll give them a certain period of time to get their act together. But they were all here, now they all left. They went to other places because we allowed, people that sat in this room allowed it to happen. And I don't allow it to happen. The people in this room don't allow it to happen. So we're going to be announcing pharmaceuticals, chips, and various couple of other things, big ones. We did steel, as you know, they're 50%. We did aluminum, 50%. Lumber just came out.
Why don't you announce copper?
And we did cars. And now, today we're doing copper.
Copper and lumber. What would that tariff be on? The section tariff?
I believe the tariff on copper, we're going to make it 50%.
50%.
U.S. President Trump has launched his latest shots in his trade war, and despite negotiations underway behind closed doors with the Carney government, well, the first shot is a direct hit at Canadian copper. How hard does this hit? Canadian producers send $4.8 billion with a B, dollars worth of copper to the U.S. annually. That's 52% of their total exports. The Americans do make a lot of their own copper, but 99% of their copper concentrate imports last year were from Canada. On top of that, as you heard, Trump is also threatening a 200% tariff on pharmaceuticals within 2 years. Again, that will hurt Canadian suppliers. So far, Prime Minister Carney has remained quiet on these latest shots. Once again, I'm kind of wondering what it is that the Prime Minister is doing and why he thinks by keeping under the radar that this is going to advance our deal any more than what probably is already on paper, because we, again, as I've said so many times, it's only good for as long as Trump honors it. And that could change in a month. It could change in a year. It could change in a week. I don't get why we haven't become a little more aggressive on the outside even though we're getting handy to the July 21st deadline to reach a deal, why we haven't put a little pressure back at him in the manner that he is, really twisting us under his thumb. Eddie?
Yeah, you know what, Gary? I really don't. It's very difficult to put myself in Carney's mind and what he's thinking. As I said, and you said, things change instantaneously in a day, same day. Trump will change his mind about things. It's very hard to think how Carney is planning to circumvent these new threats, or how to retaliate against these new threats, or rather than retaliate, how to placate Trump and get what he really needs to get done. I really don't know. It's hard. Gary, you know how it is. It's hard to run a household, let alone how to run a business, if you don't know potentially what's going to be stable over the next little while. If you work on the 80-20, 80% of you're making your decisions based on 80% of what you know will happen. And then 20% in terms of, well, you know what, this is a just in case. Well, when you're dealing with the United States, it's very difficult to plan your 80% because it's really not your 80%. It's maybe 20% where this is what we can actually plan to see. And then the 80 other percent is variable, uncertainty. How do you play? How do you plan for something like that? And you know what? This is the MO of King Trump. He'll throw things out just to keep everybody off balance, and then at some point he's going to figure out what he wants to do, because he really doesn't have any plan. He shoots from the hip, and the way he seems to manage things is just keep everybody else off balance, and at some point he'll make a decision on what he feels like doing for the day. So I feel not, I don't just feel for Prime Minister Carney. I feel for anybody doing business with the United States of America. Just extremely, extremely unpredictable. And you know what? Both you and I know this is going to turn around and bite Trump in the butt, his big orange butt, because you can't continue doing business with somebody that unstable, or a country that's unstable as a result of King Trump's administration. I don't know I really don't know what Prime Minister Carney is up to, how he's going to deal with this, or even have an opinion on what he should be doing. Stay the course, maybe. And I know both you and I would like to see Carney's administration punch the orange guy in the nose once or twice to see how he bleeds. I don't know. It's hard to say, Gary. It's frustrating to see things change on a daily basis from the Oval Office, and I guess it's equally frustrating not seeing anything coming out of Ottawa in terms of, well, this is how I'm going to respond to that. Or maybe Carney chooses not to respond to it because it's just sheer stupidity and rhetoric, right? I don't know. It's hard to say. What do you think?
I know that the Prime Minister and his ministers who are working on the file and negotiating behind the scenes, I know that they're trying to get the best deal possible for Canada. But at this particular stage of the game, I think most of those cards are on the table. And I think it's time for us to, in the same way that Carney managed to manipulate Trump into agreeing to, let's get a deal done within 30 days, at the G7. And that's July 21st. So he managed to do that. But, okay, they're behind closed doors. We all know that there are going to be some concessions, and the first concession was the digital sales tax.
Right.
Okay, and the way that went down, was not pretty. I don't care. I don't care. It was not pretty. And I'm still bitter about that. But it happened, and I moved on, carrying a little bit of bitterness with me. But if he just keeps hammering us and we're not responding in any way, shape, or form, and we're trying to salvage what's left of this deal behind closed doors, each time, in my opinion, and I would like for you to tell me, and anyone watching, tell me I'm wrong, that every knock that Trump is taking and has been taking is putting us more in a position of weakness as far as dealing is concerned. Trump sees, okay, boom, I got that. All right. He just keeps moving on. He's not going to give up.
Are you saying that our perception as a Canadian weakness becomes more prevalent with Trump? The sign of weakness grows to Trump.
Yes.
And that's just in North America. I'm just thinking about what you said. The world is watching what we're doing. We're on the front lines here. What is Europe going to think of us if we capitulate more often than not? Right. That's also another question we have to contend with, because if we're going to be establishing close relationship and ties with other parts of the world, Europe, Asia Pac, for example. Yeah, interesting. They're watching to see how we're dealing with the situation. And you know what? They're business people. Those countries are in business for themselves as well. Those regions are in business for themselves. Are they going to recognize perhaps that maybe Canada's a little weak in terms of their negotiation? And they're going to take advantage of it as well. You know what? You're right. I'd never thought of that.
And that the other side of it is that's why a lot of the countries have not, remember he said we'll have 90 deals in 90 days. And that hasn't materialized after the Liberation Day in April. Anyway, and I heard somebody else say the same thing here, something similar in the fact that at that point, other countries were watching to see how this negotiation between us and the Americans was going to come out. And then at that point, we hadn't had the 21 or the 30-day time frame.
Right.
Now that we have the 30-day time frame, there's still not, a lot of countries are not falling over themselves to get a deal signed with Trump. Yeah. And some of them are citing, well, it's before the world courts now, and yes, it is before the world courts, and we all know that lawyers will build that for what it's worth, and that'll be, I may not even be around by the time that one is settled.
Besides, the supreme leader in the States is not going to listen to what the international courts tell him anyway.
Exactly. Right? So they're watching us and how we're handling this. And do you know the other side of this, Eddie? Have you heard Mexico mentioned lately?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I haven't.
No, not
related
at all.
To trade?
You know what? I think Trump is just, like you're saying, there's no big deal signed. He's sending these letters out telling these smaller countries, developing countries that, this is what you're going to be tariffed. Well, countries are not tariffed. It's importers in the United States that are going to be tariffed for doing business with these countries. I mean, he continues to say this country and that country are going to be tariffed. At the end of the day, you kind of look at this and say, where does it stop? When does it stop? He hasn't declared a big win yet. He's always talking about Britain. Okay, so fine. An Aston Martin and a Rolls Royce. Yeah, you know what? In the United States, the importers are not going to be tariffed for those luxury vehicles, and that's the big deal that he's always talking about. Where really there isn't any. So the man, he is looking for a win. And you know what? He's looking north and he's looking at us for that big win, because if he can declare some sort of a big win here in Canada, and any small thing he declares as a big win, we, with this, with us capitulating on the digital laws and then the taxes, he's declaring that a win that we flinched up here. Um, I'm sure he agreed to this thing, this 30-day deal with Carney during the G7, because he knows he needs a big player to sign something with him, because that'll send a message to the rest of the world that, oh, I'm King Trump, and this is what I did to Canada, and you guys everywhere else better pay attention to what happened with Canada. He's just looking for a big win, and unfortunately, we're stuck with this neighbor. We're stuck with Trump and his antics, and his and the Oval Office and everything in Washington. They are going to push hard to get a deal with Canada, and I think they're going to continue throwing threats up here to get that deal signed. Can you imagine Trump coming away with this after 30 days and a deal is not done? Well, he's going to call me and you, those big bad Canadians are hard to deal with, Gary. I mean, you and I are bad people. We're bad hombres up here. We don't play fair. Canadians don't play fair, which is the rhetoric that you continue to see spun whenever he's on Fox News and some of these other right wing propaganda channels. That's he's looking for that win. He's getting desperate for that win, and I'm hoping that Prime Minister Carney sees that, he senses that, and he's just playing some sort of a game that you and I are not aware about. And I guess I'm placing my faith and trust in Prime Minister Carney right now, that he is going to do the right thing, and we're gonna look good after the 30 days, one way or the other. I think he senses that President Trump is getting desperate because he's got nothing on the table right now.
Well, hopefully,
except with the islands of penguins.
Yeah, exactly. Nancy says, trust our PM. He is smarter than Trump. And Joe weighs in with, we'll see what transpires by the 21st. I'm hoping that Carney is making backroom deals with other nations while stroking T-Rump's ego.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Another good point. Hopefully he is.
Maybe that's what Claudia Sheinbaum is doing, which is why you're not hearing anything about Mexico.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. She's one very, very smart lady. So it could very well be that, Eddie. And you brought up the point last week about how Carney has arrived at some of these summits and everything, like a couple of days early.
Right.
And met with the various leaders and some business people and others long before the other leaders arrive for the actual summit. So he's certainly, I agree with you that he has used time to constructively work the crowd, if you will, press the flesh and work the crowd, and hey, we're open for business, and
mm-hmm.
I'm sure. But still, the other side of it is we've got this guy south of us, and we still have 3 years, and we have to at some point it's he's the schoolyard bully. At some point, someone stands up and just says whack.
Yeah,
it's game over.
The sooner the better.
Yeah, and it's over. Yeah. So I hope so. Now, just to come back around to what we were talking about originally in segment 1, the contract, from what I can see, has not been awarded yet. The tenders were called, and that's when the specs for the tender came up. Mm-hmm. And the way that it was written and presented favored one company in particular.
In the States.
And that was, a U.S. company. So it looks like it still has not been awarded. And a story that was done by the CBC relating to this issue they asked for a comment from the Minister of National Defense, or at least the department, and they had not received anything at the time of this story going to air and being published on the website. So it's out there. It's sitting, I guess, under review, and that could take anywhere from now until 5 years from now, unless Carney is late this afternoon. I saw something from Carney saying there's too much regulation within government. We need to start cleaning it up because it's moving too slowly. And it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And this is a prime example. Defense procurement is a prime example of how not to run this kind of a organization that's responsible for purchasing. Yes, you listen to your defense partners, the Army, Navy, Air Force, as to what they want and what they need, and then you put it all together. But you can't keep running back and forth and changing it, and even more so after the contract has been awarded and they start building these things.
Right, exactly.
It takes forever. And then you end up with some kind of alien type of vehicle or whatever, and it's just going to be a headache to maintain going forward. Anyway, that's a whole other issue. So I think it's time to wrap for this week. Certainly, we've had some great comments coming in. And again, keep the conversation going. If you're watching the replay at some point between now and next week, by all means, drop a comment below because we will respond. There are a couple of comments yesterday and today related to the segment we did last week on Pierre Poilievre and the by-election he's going to be running in Alberta. And it was good to see those comments. I responded to them. And, it was very, very civil. So it's good to see that. And comments coming in after the fact like that, as well as comments during the show, help us to grow the channel and grow the stream and help by helping us to get exposed to more people like you so we can expand and have an even bigger conversation and get a diverse set of opinions and maybe even have a little bit of fun and get to know some of the regulars and everything. That's what it's all about. So that's that part of it. And remember to like, share, and subscribe. That also helps us. So one other thing I just wanted to point out, just to maybe put a wrap on this for the evening. One thing that I think is becoming clear is despite a lot of talk about lofty ideals, most of it right now is just political noise at this point. It's long past time to get serious. Actions do speak louder than words. Again, thank you for checking out this week's edition of Night Talk. And as I say, if you're watching the replays, keep the conversation going. We will respond to your comments. And don't forget, it's really important also to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. We picked up another subscriber this week, Eddie. It's all helping, as I say, expose our stream and channel to more people like you, and we like you, so we want more like you. Night Talk returns in 7 days. I'm Gary MacDonald. Good night.
Good night, everybody.